Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Boy here, and we are going to be doing something a bit different from my other videos. We are going to be doing a tier list of the books written by Rick Riordan. So, I know I haven't uploaded in a while, but I'll compensate for that by uploading more videos on tier lists like these, and perhaps more videos of educational content. So, if you don't know, Rick Riordan is one of the best authors, I would say arguably, in the world, and he's written so many books that I grew up with, such as The Lightning Thief and the Heroes of Olympus series, Trials of Apollo, and he's just a really, really good author, and he has a really good sense of humor as well. And his writing styles are very interesting to read. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, right off the bat, we have The Lightning Thief, and that was without question. It goes into S tier. That book was really good. Um, it introduced us to Percy Jackson and his life as not a not so normal kid, growing up with monsters trying to kill him, especially him because he is the son of Poseidon, so he has a stronger scent. And Percy's point of view is very funny to read. And just seeing how later in the book his friends Annabeth and Grover supported him, especially during his before the fight with Hades. I know, Ares, sorry, and the character development in this book and Percy just getting to know his surroundings is very interesting to read. The Lightning Thief is the first book in the Percy Jackson and Olympian series, and it was a really good book. So S tier. Now we have Son of Neptune, so also sort of centers on Percy Jackson. So The Son of Neptune is the second book in the Heroes of Olympus series, which I believe succeeds the Percy Jackson series. Anyways, this book revolves around three characters: Percy Jackson, Frank Zhang, and Hazel Levesque. And the book has a really interesting dynamic because one of the characters, Hazel Levesque, is from the past actually. So that kind of mirrors Nico D'Angelo, which we saw in the Percy Jackson series. And Hazel is actually a son of no, a daughter of Pluto. And well, speaking of Pluto, Pluto is a Roman god. So in the Heroes of Olympus series, we are introduced in this book, the Son of Neptune. We are introduced to Camp Jupiter. So in the Son of Neptune, we are introduced to Camp Jupiter, which is basically the Roman counterpart of Camp Half-Blood, and we're introduced to all these Roman gods, these Roman demigods, these Roman traditions, and it's really interesting to read. The Son of Neptune, the plot itself was pretty good, not as good as The Lightning Thief, I would say, and the book was pretty long. It was, I believe, 500 pages, and around that amount. And The Son of Neptune, it was a pretty good book. I'm gonna give The Son of Neptune A tier. I'm not gonna give it S tier because for me personally, it didn't really feel like an S tier book. But it's definitely up there. It's definitely a good book. And then we have The Mark of Athena. So The Mark of Athena, it's also a book. It's the third book in the Heroes of Olympus series that comes after The Mark of Athena. This book is a really good book. Probably one of the best, arguably in my opinion, written by Rick Riordan. Um, the Mark of Athena it centers around Annabeth Chase, who is the girlfriend of Percy Jackson, who we explored in the last two books. And there's the touching moment when Annabeth reunites with Percy after I believe 8 months um, of separation, and it's very touching. And just seeing Annabeth in the later part of the book, Annabeth struggle through a lot of obstacles, monsters, to find the Athena Parthenos and bring it to Camp Half Blood to uh, to basically heal the rift between Greeks and Romans. Just seeing Annabeth go through all of that, and as well as the point of view of other characters such as Leo, Jason, um, Piper, I believe, Percy, I think also, and just seeing the whole crew of the Argo 2, Percy, Annabeth, Jason, Piper, Leo, Frank, and Hazel, all of them work as a team to overcome the obstacles and defeat Gaia. Well, not in this book, but overcome the obstacles to accomplish goals. Is a really good book, and yeah, Mark of Athena undoubtedly gets S tier. And this book was really long. It was, I think, 500 to 600 pages. And now we get to the House of Hades. Man, that was a good. Me personally, that was the best book that Rick Riordan has ever written. The House of Hades. That it was just a good book. It was just a good book. Um, this book was 700 pages. But it made up for that with actually no, I don't. I like long books, but anyways, um, Thousand of Hades is the fourth book that in the Heroes of Olympus series that comes after the Mark of Athena, and this book centers mainly around I think Percy and Annabeth surviving through Tartarus, and this is Tartarus we're talking about, so it just really tests their relationship and makes their bond. It makes their relationship very very strong, and then seeing uh seeing some of the words of the prophecy just come to light, like come true. Seeing that in this book is really symbolic, and also the character development in this book is insane. There is so much character development in this book. It's unbelievable by both Frank and Hazel. Frank going from this insecure demigod to a true son of Mars, while Hazel being going from unconfident to being able to control the mist itself. And the character development between and the character development in those two characters is just seeing them be transformed is amazing. And seeing Annabeth and Percy uh, basically help each other to Tartarus, and um, especially the especially at the end when Bob and Damison sacrifice themselves for Percy and Annabeth is a really sad part, but it adds something to the whole thing of the book. Yeah, and the House of Hades is just a good book. It was really good. House of Hades all the way at the top, above Mark of Tina and the Lightning Thief. Now we get to the final book in the Heroes of Olympus series, The Blood of Olympus. This book was the finale, gods, demigods versus the giants and the monsters. Um, this book was a pretty good book, and I didn't really have that much to say for it, except actually, I do have something to say for it because the character development from Nico is really good, and seeing Reina, Nico, and Coach Hedge just work together as a team to bring the Athena Partners back to Camp Half Blood, and against all odds, and seeing Reina at the end fighting Orion with the help of two goddesses, Bellona and Athena, and then seeing the final stand, the battle at Camp Half Blood and the battle at the Parthenon. It's just really good, and the interaction between the gods and their children. We don't get to see that often. It's really interesting to read, but it's not. It would. I don't think for me it wasn't as good as House of Hades, and so I'm gonna put that just above the Sun of Neptune at 18. So that now we have Magnus Chase. So I don't really have anything that much to say about Magnus Chase, but it was definitely a good book. We are introduced to Magnus Chase basically, and um the Norse gods. So we had Greek gods in both in all of these books. Now we have Norse gods. And if you don't know, guys, Magnus Chase is the cousin of Annabeth Chase, who is the girlfriend of Percy Jackson. And yeah, it was a pretty good book. So I'm gonna rank this book at B tier because um it was a good book in its own right, but not on the same level as these books right here. But saying that, it did a really good job of introducing us to Norse mythology. So actually, I'm gonna give it low A tier. Then Magnus Chase, the second book, I'm gonna give this one B tier. I don't recall that much about it. Then I believe the Magnus Chase books aren't finished, so I'm gonna give the third book. No, I remember the third book being really good, so I'm gonna give it high A tier. Actually, no, I'm gonna give it high B tier. And we have the Trials of Apollo. So, um, this book, I recently reread the Trials of Apollo series, and it's a good book. Trials of Apollo, we get to see Apollo change from a narcissistic god to a rather selfless person who actually thinks about the people, and we see the return of characters like Percy Jackson, Rachel there, and we also find out that Percy is going to have a little sister. But this book is not about Percy. This book is about Apollo, and we see the introduction. We have the introduction of Meg McCaffrey, who claims Apollo, and at the end, there's a big plot twist, but I won't reveal it to you because if you haven't read it, I don't want to spoil it. But it's really good seeing the interact. It's very interesting to see the interactions between Apollo and his children, and how his children basically stand up for him, even though he's probably done nothing for them in their entire lives. But seeing Apollo change from uh, a selfish god to a selfless person is just it's just amazing to see. So I'm gonna give that one I'm gonna give it low S tier. It was a really good book. Actually, it wasn't as good as I'm gonna give it A tier because it just wasn't on the level of as some of these books in S tier. Then we have the the hold on, what was that book again? So I forgot to mention the Trials of Apollo is the first book in oh no the Hidden Oracle is the first book in the Trials of Apollo series, and yeah, so we get to the Dark Prophecy, which is the second book in the Trials of Apollo series, and it was I'm gonna do that one low no B because I don't know it wasn't as good as the first one, and it kind of dragged on. I feel like with Apollo and Meg and all that, and yeah. So let's just continue. So now we have Trials of Apollo, the Burning Maze. So we get to see Meg's past in this book, and uh, also it had a funny plot. It was a pretty good book. I'm gonna give it high B tier because it just wasn't on par with some of the books in A tier and S tier. And now we actually have uh the Sea of Monsters. So this is the second book of the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, which I thought was a really good series. And this book was actually my least favorite out of the Percy Jackson series because um I feel like it kind of dragged on with Percy and Annabeth and Tyson going to save Grover and get the Golden Fleece, and I don't know. The plot was kind of mediocre. I'm gonna give it B tier, and I'm not gonna give. Just so you know, I'm not gonna give Riordan's books. And I'm not gonna give any of Riordan's books a C tier because all of them were really good. So I'm not gonna venture as far as to give it a C tier. But anyways, now we have the Titan's Curse, and this book was a really good book. And just seeing Percy go travel across the United States to save Annabeth, and the introduction of characters like Nico and Bianca D'Angelo, as well as getting our first glimpse of Artemis and Apollo, I believe, is pretty interesting. And Zoe's death at the end is also very tragic. And seeing Percy hold the sky for um, Annabeth is just I think no, he took it from Artemis, but just it's a um I just got a lot of goosebumps in this book, so I'm gonna give this one A tier because it was a good book. I liked it a lot, just above Son of Neptune. But actually, I think Son of Neptune was a really good book, so I'm just gonna give Titan's Curse third place in A tier. The Battle of the Labyrinth. Okay, so this was a good book. I believe it was the longest book out of the Percy Jackson series, amounting to around 400 pages. But so yeah, so we are going to do that. So this is an interesting book. It was the fourth book in the Percy Jackson series, and just seeing Percy and Annabeth, and I believe Tyson and Grover journey through the labyrinth is interesting, and also when Grover finds Pen, that is a very interesting scene to read. And we get our first look at Hera, who is not my favorite goddess, but anyways, the plot was. I feel like it was better than Sea of Monsters. um, it was a really good book, and the Battle of the Labyrinth at the end, is was interesting to read, and Nico especially, Nico's the drastic change in Nico's character and his personality from this happy kid in the Titan's Curse to a loner, excuse me, a loner in the Battle of the Labyrinth, who's bitter and angry at Percy, and seeing Nico like that, and it's kind of sad, you know. And I think this book's a really good book. I think it actually beats the Son of Neptune. Actually, no, I'm gonna. Actually, it does not. But it's right there. It's right there. It's really close. So, oh, Last Olympian. That was okay. Yeah, that automatically takes it S tier because Last Olympian just seeing just I believe 40 demigods around that amount fight against Cronus's vast forces, and seeing everybody in the series seeing everybody that we've seen in the series so far come together to defend the good against evil, and seeing Percy interact with the gods at the end is very interesting, and seeing Annabeth and Percy officially like become a couple is also interesting, and there's some really um big moments that give me goosebumps, such as when Annabeth took the knife for Percy, because Percy could have died. He could have died, but Annabeth took the knife for him. And seeing Percy go into the river Styx is very interesting. But now we are going to go to Kane Chronicles. So the Red Pyramid, I think, is a really good book. I'm gonna give it a tier. And you know what, guys? I changed my mind. I'm gonna give Blood of Olympus a S tier as well as Son of Neptune because those books were just really good. So yeah. And anyways, Red Pyramid gets high A tier. Oh no, third place in A tier because it just did a really good job of introducing us to Egyptian mythology, Egyptian mythology, and is I think um introducing us to Riordan introducing us to characters. He did a good job doing that. It was a pretty good book. Not as good as probably the Percy Jackson series, but it was a really good book. So the Throne of Fire, that was a pretty good book as well. Not as good as um the first one, but it was a really good book. So I'm gonna give that one low A tier. And then Super Shadow was a really good book. Me personally, I love that book. So I'm gonna give that one high A tier actually, beating the Titan's Curse. Oh, now we have the Lost Hero. So if you didn't know, the Lost Hero is actually the first book in the Heroes of Olympus series, and we are introduced to new characters: Jason Grace, Piper, McLean, and Leo uh, Valdez. Sorry, and I think Leo's comedy definitely makes the book very funny, and the seeing the so something that kind of scales on the book a bit. I feel like is the awkward relationship between Jason and Piper because if you didn't know, Hera basically set them up to be a couple, and yeah, it's kind of awkward. But I think the action in this book is really good, and it kind of compensates for that. So I'm gonna give this book um I'm gonna give it low A, just above the Red Pyramid, and that is Rick Riordan's books ranked. So I know that Charles of Apollo, the last two books are not in here, but um, I'm sorry about that, but I could not find a better one than this. So thank you for watching this video. This is the Info Boy. Please remember to hit the subscribe button, and this is Info Boy out.